Okay, so moving on to this topic of this week's workshop, I'm going to show you a handout which starts with the Dorian. So they're all going to have flattened third by definition, or they're not minor, and they're also going to have the flattened seventh. So this is 3 different modes, all of which fit a C minor 7 chord. So we're not going to be changing the left hand this time. Let's play the Dorian. 1, 2, 3, loop it as before. Yeah, so play the chord on the 1 at the top as well as at the bottom. Coming down, the 1 is on the B flat. I noticed that your hands are next to each other. If you put the right hand up an octave, you don't have the slightly awkward loop. If you play it up here, you can loop down to the B flat without it overlapping with the left hand. I think it would be good to review the Dorian. For instance, D minor. Last time we talked about how you can play 2 chords, D minor and E minor, D minor 7, E minor 7, and how they're a tone apart, and in fact between them they've got all the notes of the D minor mode, the Dorian mode. So if you were improvising with the mode or some patterns based on D minor Dorian, you could actually create a bit of interest by moving that chord up and down. So if you want to join in, just play those 2 chords like a bar each. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Let's do it with the metronome, shall we? So I'll speed it up a bit. 1, 3, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. So just keep alternating those. Remember that all the notes you're playing are white notes. Now just improvise. I won't be able to hear you. You'll be able to hear me. I'll leave some gaps. Your turn. 4 bars each. My turn again. Your turn. My turn. Your turn. Okay, now this is very traditional chord voicings based in thirds. You can do something similar if we use quartal voicings. And so instead of playing DFAC, just play DGC. And we'll move that up a tone and back as well. So now it's going to sound more contemporary. This is what started happening in the 60s when McCoy Tyner and Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, even Bill Evans started moving towards this sound, this post-bop sound, quartal harmony based on perfect fourths. Your turn. did the first two on this diagram, and then I've skipped the third one that we played, and I've gone to the fourth, and the ones on the fourth and the fifth. So those are equally good for D minor. In fact, the one based on the fourth here, it's got an F in, which is an advantage if you're playing a D minor chord. Neither of these had an F in, did they? However, you can use any of these shapes for D minor. So this is what playing quartal shapes and thinking modally brought to the table. Instead of just having a couple of ways of playing D minor now, we've got as many as you want, maybe even 7. If you include the one on the F, and then we can go even higher. But before we do that, let's try the same thing and use these two instead. Instead of the one on D and E, we'll use G and A. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's try that rhythm. Now D minor, Dorian. Try and keep that rhythm going. Your turn. Yeah, so now you can see there's so many different ways of playing D minor. Even if you just stick to the notes of the chord, you've got a lot of different options. And you need those options if you're playing a tune like So What, because you've got 16 bars on that chord. And you can't just play the same shape for 16 bars, it just gets too repetitive. So here's a diagram of all the shapes based on the Dorian mode. We did that just now, and we've played the next two, but the last two we haven't played yet. The one on 6, no reason why you shouldn't play that, but the next one is a little bit, have to be a bit careful with this one. Can you hear that that's a bit more discordant? What about down here? Even more discordant if you play it lower. So be careful with that one. If you want that specific sound, go ahead and use it, but it's not the most obvious way to play a D minor 7 chord. It's quite, it sounds a bit out there, doesn't it? But the others are all, you know, you hear them all the time. So you can play all of that could be underneath your improvisation in the first 8 or 16 bars of So What, for instance. Now, of course, this is easy with the white notes, isn't it? But you need to be familiar with the same thing, the same set of quartal shapes for other keys. Like, for instance, if you were playing So What, you'd need it for E flat. And so you need to remind yourself what the notes of the E flat scale are, and then make sure that you get the right combination of notes. Perfect fourths, then the augmented fourth on the bottom, back to perfect fourths 3 times, and then the next one has the augmented fourth on top, and that's the one I'd recommend you maybe don't use all the time. It has a specific sound. There are times when you're going to want that sound, but not perhaps in playing a standard with a singer. If you've got an E flat minor chord, you might get a few raised eyebrows if you play that shape. Now, before we leave the Dorian mode, let's just look at the So What voicing, which is a really important thing to get under your belt. If you don't know it already, the left hand is basically what we were just doing, but back to front. We're starting on E and going to D. And we've added 2 notes in the right hand, also from the mode. And then the same thing. So look at the way I've spelt that voicing from the bottom up. Root 4-7 in the left hand, 3 and 5 in the right hand. So the second of the 2 chords is the one that looks most like D minor. So the right hand is playing the 3rd and the 5th, and the left hand has got the 4th in the middle. You could say that the first chord, which is the same thing, a tone up, you could say that that's basically E minor, but it's also in the Dorian scale of D. Remember we started out by alternating the tertiary shapes. So yeah, when we played shapes based on thirds, we also went from D minor to E minor. Now we're doing it in a quartal or a so what voicing. And so what goes. Okay, so that's an important example of using quartal voicings to get the contemporary sound in the context of the Dorian mode. Okay, so Miles Davis didn't invent modes, they were there already. In fact, they date back to church music in the medieval times, before major minor system, you know, and that's why we don't use, we're really using those scales in place of melodic minors and harmonic minors. It's not that we don't use melodic minor and harmonic minor, but you have to know how to use them, and then neither of them fit a minor 7th chord. So when you have G minor 7, it's not appropriate to play the harmonic minor or the melodic, because that has an F sharp in. In classical music, the melodic minor comes down the Aeolian mode. It goes up like this, but comes down like this. But in jazz we don't do that. We call the first one melodic, and you can play that any direction you like, and the descending form is the equivalent of the Aeolian mode or the natural minor, and you can play that up or down as well.